Let's go. Well, g'day everyone, and welcome to week number 20 here in our 2025 Chronological Bible-in-a-Year Reading Challenge. I've said it so many times, you think it just flows off the tongue, right? Anyway, here we are, week number 20, but as promised, our third and final week focusing in on the character King Solomon. Now, typically, as I do these videos, I talk about the narrative first and then the poetic or wisdom books is what we're reading. This video, I'm going to do the opposite and actually suggest that you read the books in the opposite order, as it were. So we're going to be finishing off the book of Proverbs, the final 7 chapters. I won't say anything about that in this video because we covered pretty well the book of Proverbs last week. Secondly, we're going to be reading Ecclesiastes, okay, 12 chapters. If you did it in one sitting, which I suggest, if you can set aside the time, you need to allow around about 20 to 30 minutes to smash out Ecclesiastes. I'll have more to say about that in a moment. And then we're reading 3 chapters of narrative, again, between Kings and Chronicles, as we witness Solomon's final days of life and his final days as the king of Israel. And as good as things have been going to date, let's just say the last part of his life isn't that amazing. Anyway, we'll get to there in a moment. First of all, the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, Ecclesiastes we're reading at this point in time because it's often attributed to King Solomon. I mean, that seems pretty obvious. It actually says that right at the start. But there is a high probability that it wasn't actually written by Solomon himself. There is the theory that this could very well be what's known as a fictional autobiography, all right, where essentially an author, an anonymous author, assumes the identity of a royal figure, commonly, it was a pretty common genre at the time, and speaks on their behalf, all right? So you actually find, for example, right at the start, when the Solomon character begins to speak, that he says, I was king of Israel, or I was king of Israel in Jerusalem. Now, what we know from Solomon's life is there was never a moment where he wasn't king until he died. Okay, so it's not like he was fired from his job and then wrote Ecclesiastes and said, I was king. No, so he was always king up to the point of his death. And so that kind of writing about him being king in the past tense lends some people to believe, well, maybe Solomon didn't write this. Maybe these are post-mortem reflections of a dead king, okay, something like that. Maybe the whole genre itself is fictional autobiography. Okay, I'll leave that with you. Either way, one thing that is clear is both the intro and the outro of the book, the prologue and the epilogue, are written in the third person. So they're written about Solomon, okay? But the bulk of the book is written Solomon speaking himself, and whether it's speaking to himself, we're not sure, or speaking to an unknown audience, well, we're not sure exactly. The audience is unknown. It's not like the book of Proverbs where he's speaking to his son. And as I see it, and any theologians listening might freak out at this, but here's basically the way I see Solomon's 3 books, okay? Song of Songs, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Song of Songs is basically Solomon as a young man writing about young romance. And it's very romantic, we saw that, and it's quite idealistic. Proverbs is collated by Solomon, not a young man, but as a father writing to his young son. Okay, so it's kind of Solomon in that next stage of his life. Well, where does Ecclesiastes fit in? Well, Ecclesiastes is a little bit like the rantings and ravings of an old man, all right? I just sort of picture Solomon, an old man sitting at the pub, okay, or out there with his fishing reel kind of thing, just sort of ranting and raving about life. It kind of has that very melancholic feel to it. In fact, it reminds me when I read Ecclesiastes of the old saying, there's only 2 things inevitable about life. Number 1, you're going to die, okay, death is inevitable, and number 2, you're going to pay taxes. It's kind of a depressing sort of saying about life. Well, that's very much the feel that Ecclesiastes has. It's like an old man is saying, you know what, there's only one thing inevitable, and that is you're going to work hard, you're going to get old, and bad luck will happen to you somewhere along the way, okay? So it's not a young man who's very idealistic and positive about life. I sort of picture that old man who's got quite a few runs on the board, quite a few bruises from life, and is quite melancholic as he looks back over life and his rantings and ravings and his reflections there. All right, so if you're feeling a bit melancholic, then Ecclesiastes is the book for you, okay? But even though, you might have to sift through a bit of that depressive talk, there is wisdom in there, all right? Even the grumpiest of old men in their rantings and ravings has some kind of wisdom to share, so I'm sure you'll find some blessing in that. Go for it. If you can do it in one sitting, please do. And if you're interested reading it going, why the heck is this book even in our Bible in the first place? Well, I'll leave that to you to research as to how it fits in the wisdom literature. Okay, so there you go. That's Ecclesiastes. All the best. Enjoy it. Don't get too depressed. Maybe go read it out in the sun or something. Okay, there you go. But however, the most important thing this week really is what takes place in our narrative. As I said, we're only reading 3 chapters of narrative, so please read that together. Okay, First Kings 10 and 11 and 2 Chronicles 9, which admittedly is a whole bunch of copy and pasting. Again, 2 Chronicles 9 very much just borrows everything there from Kings. And these 2 chapters, chapters 10 and 11 of 1 Kings, basically describe the not so wise years, latter years of Solomon's life, and also end with a prophetic prediction of an impending split in the kingdom. This wonderful, glorious, united or unified kingdom built by David and solidified by Solomon is predicted to be split. Whether that happens or not, well, you have to wait and see next week. All right. So basically what happens is King Solomon in his latter years disobeys Moses' 3 warnings from Deuteronomy 17. We kind of hinted at this the other week. Moses said, when you appoint a king in the future, make sure he doesn't acquire a great number of horses, especially from Egypt. Well, that's exactly what Solomon does. Moses says, make sure he doesn't amass large amounts of gold and silver, otherwise he'll trust in his wealth and not Holy Spirit, basically. And well, that's exactly what Solomon does. And the third thing he says is, please make sure this king does not take for himself many wives, and particularly foreign wives, many of which were forbidden under the Old Covenant law anyway. And lo and behold, in his latter years, that is precisely what King Solomon does. He was famous for having, I think it's 700 wives and 300 concubines on the side. I mean, whatever. The guy had issues, all right? But with those issues came all the predictable things that Moses predicted, and that, if we read this correctly, is predicted in the Adam and Eve story, where these foreign wives win the heart of Solomon, okay, and convince him to take the forbidden fruit of idolatry, worshipping foreign gods, worshipping other gods, and Solomon takes that fruit and therefore suffers the consequences of it. All right, he ends up worshipping foreign gods because he's more loyal to his wives, okay, than he is to God's covenant. And because of this, basically, it says there in Kings, the Lord's anger is aroused against Solomon, and 3 things happen, or at least 3 things happen in those 2 chapters this week. The first thing is that the Lord confronts Solomon directly. We don't know how. It doesn't say a dream or a vision or a voice or an angel or whatever. It just says the Lord spoke to Solomon, and he basically says to him, listen, mate, because of basically your legacy and your father, King David, I am going to take the kingdom away from, not you specifically, but from your son after you. In fact, your son after you will only lead one tribe of Israel, not all 13 tribes, okay? He'll only lead one tribe, and the word there is, I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you. So this legacy that you have, essentially, once you die and your son takes over, will basically disintegrate or collapse before you. Although, of course, because I'll be faithful to David, you'll still have a son on the throne, but the empire of Israel will not be nearly as large as what it is now. So the Lord speaks to Solomon directly that is basically the penalty or the consequence of him disobeying the law and worshipping foreign gods. The second thing that God does is he raises up 3 men, okay, to create trouble for Solomon. And the word there, incidentally, is adversaries. God raises up adversaries. If you click on the word in the Hebrew, the word is, guess what? Satan. Okay. God raises up Satans, okay, human men, to come against Solomon. The first 2 are basically foreign military leaders, just to annoy him, be a thorn in his side, so to speak. But the third guy is actually an Israelite from the tribe of Ephraim, and his name is Jeroboam. And God raises up Jeroboam to, in a sense, be an adversary to Solomon. And this is where the third key thing comes in this week. Number 1, God speaks to Solomon directly. Number 2, behind the scenes, he raises up these 3 Satan figures. But number 3, the third thing God does, is he speaks to one of those figures, Jeroboam, the Israelite from Ephraim, a prophet called Ahijah comes to Jeroboam privately, it would seem, and says, Jeroboam, when Solomon dies and his son takes over, he's only going to lead one tribe. You are going to lead the rest. And the way he does that is he takes his cloak off, he divides it into 12 pieces, okay, the 12 tribes of Israel, and he hands Jeroboam 10 pieces. He says, you'll get 10, Solomon's son will get 1, and if you are careful to obey all the covenant law, if you do the right thing, you and your family will have a legacy just like David. You will have a lasting kingdom with those 10 tribes. And it's here very much that we see the prophetic ministry come to the fore. From here on in particular, we're going to see prophets operate very much like this, where essentially prophets, when they speak to Old Testament kings, do two main things. The first is that they serve as ministers of the courtroom of heaven. They see things or hear things in heaven and they speak that to the earth. All right? We're going to see that as things come along. But the second thing they do, and this is what we see with Ahijah here, is they are not only ministers of heaven's courtroom, they are also ministers of the Moses covenant. Okay? They are ministers of heaven, the courtroom, and they're ministers of the covenant. Basically what they do is they read the script of Moses. Okay, they go back to Deuteronomy and back to Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus. They read that script and they say, these are the curses that will come upon you because you've disobeyed, or these are the blessings that will come upon you if you obey. And Ahijah does this, okay, very much in rebuking Solomon, to Jeroboam at least, rebuking him for worshipping foreign gods. Well, curse is coming, but blessing will come upon you, Jeroboam, if you obey the Lord. What is he doing? Well, he's simply reading the covenant script of Moses given in the Torah. Okay, so just take a note of that because we're going to see this over and over and over again as we see the prophets rise. What's your point, Chad? Well, the point is simply this. In his last days, while most of Solomon's days were glorious, okay, wealth and wisdom were his and humility at the beginning, toward the end of his life at some point, things don't go that well. He disobeys the covenant of Moses and the specific warnings that Moses gave. He disobeys them all. God says, I'm going to take the kingdom away from your son. I'm going to take it from the whole kingdom to just one tribe. And he rose up adversaries against Solomon, and a prophecy comes to the future king of the next lot of 10 tribes as this split is prophesied, which begs a couple of questions. Number one, how come there's only 10 tribes prophesied and then 1 for Solomon's son? That only makes 11. How does that add up there? And will this prophecy actually come true? Will it come about? Is this what is going to happen in the future as foretold by prophecy and as Solomon has heard the Lord say for himself? Well, we're going to have to wait till next week. Until then, enjoy your readings, guys. Don't get too depressed as you read Ecclesiastes. Smash through the end of Proverbs. I'm sure you'll love it. And get that narrative done, those 3 chapters together. All right, bless you heaps. I'll see you next week as we witness. Well, let's just see until then. All right, bless you heaps. Bye.